Okay, K219, Project 667 Alpha. Keel is laid in May 1970. This is a Sevmash shipyard project over there on the Atlantic side. October 1971, she is launched and commissioned December 1971. And this is the one that had the major catastrophe off the coast of Bermuda. As you can see there, the missile tube number 6 literally explodes. And we'll talk about this a little bit. But before we're there, before it explodes, in August 1973, during a patrol in the North Atlantic, a valve was opened from a missile tube to the ocean, allowing seawater into the missile tube while submerged. Because they were not near the surface, it had a lot of pressure. The depth caused the pressure to exceed 10 times that of sea level, crushing the missile fuel tanks. The missile fuel flooded the tube, mixed with water, creating a toxic gas, including an acidic substance that begins eating seals and stuff. So this is the beginning of a chain reaction that is going to raise the temperature in the tube, cause a fire. It's a real mess. And the only way that they avoid a catastrophe in 1973 is they follow their procedures, they isolate the tube, and they jettison the missile. In 1973, they jettison the missile. This is something that they don't do in the future. It cost them. Okay, so they're submerged when they jettison it. The missile's lost somewhere in the North Atlantic, but they saved the submarine in the process. In 1974, the reactor operator watch officer observed depressurization of the reactor, which means there's possibly a leak somewhere in the piping. That's what that means. He pressurizes all the compartments to prevent radiation to spread to other compartments if the radiation is airborne. But it's a false alarm due to a failure with the monitoring equipment. It took 1.5 hours to decompress the entire boat, but nobody got hurt. It was just a false pressure indication in the reactor. In 1976 to 85, she completes 3 more patrols and has a dry dock period in that time. In 1986, she's off the coast of Bermuda when she suffers a nuclear missile casualty. And this is going to look a lot like what happened in 1973. All right. The nuclear weapons accident off the coast of Bermuda. K219. In 1986, her deployment schedule had changed, replacing a training and maintenance with an additional patrol. So what this means is there's more underway time with crews that aren't getting the scheduled offshore training that they're supposed to get between patrols, and maintenance that is supposed to be happening in port is being pushed back on the schedule. So you have a lower maintained submarine with a lower trained crew that is more exhausted by underway time. This is a recipe for disaster right here. And this decision was made at the highest levels of the Red Banner Navy. This is not done at the captain level or even the squadron level. This was a massive schedule change to keep up with the American deployments. They wanted more Yankee ballistic missile patrols in both the Atlantic and the Pacific. Anyway, so in August 1986, water is found in missile tube number 6. Source of the water is not discovered, but it's obviously seawater. So the water was removed with a pump. The watch officer decides to turn off the moisture detector alarms because, of course, the alarms are always going off because there's a leak in the tube. So he turns off one of his key indicators. In September 1986, K219 departs for missile patrol. So they knew about this problem before they went to sea. That is really important. He should have fixed this problem before going on this patrol, but it looks bad on everyone's service record, even those not involved in the weapons department, like the captain, if he doesn't make his patrol on time. So they're going to go to sea with a leaky missile tube. Think about that. All right. September 1986, water's found in missile tube number 6 again. Imagine that. The source, again, not identified, but it's seawater. But possible equalization valve was leaking water into the tube. So in order to launch these liquid-fueled missiles from essentially periscope depth, they can be a little bit deeper into periscope depth, they do flood the tube at the last minute with low pressure because they're very close to the surface, and then they launch the missile right away, so the water and the missile don't stay together very long. But because they have a leaky tube, the water's always in the tube, the missile's constantly moist or wet, and whenever they go deep, it gets pressurized, and that can crush the fuel tanks in the tube because it's made out of very thin aluminum to keep the weight down for the missile. Anyway, so water's pumped out of the tube regularly. They connect a hose. This is kind of jerry-rigging it. They connect a hose from the bottom of the tube to the latrine so that as the tube fills up with water or water gets in there, it just goes right down this plastic hose into a toilet, basically. This is not in accordance with any procedure or anything, but it is keeping the missile somewhat dry. Okay, the missile compartment is instructed to conduct a blow of air into the missile tube and blow some of the water out occasionally. On one occasion, he overpressurizes the missile tube trying to blow this water out, collapsing the fuel cells inside the missile. So instead of the water doing it that they're trying to prevent from crushing the missile, they do it by using too much high pressure air this time. And of course, oxidizer begins mixing with propellant and seawater that's already in the tube. And the missile tube 6 basically explodes. They don't even have a lot of time to react to this. This all happens so fast. The tube is compromised by having a hose connected to it. They overpressurize it with high pressure air. The fuel tanks implode. And then the fuel oxidizer leaks out, mixing with the seawater, explodes, and detonates the missile inside the tube, throwing the top part of the missile with the warhead out of the submarine and into the North Atlantic. So they jettison the missile whether they meant to or not. It's gone. But unfortunately, it does kill the people in missile compartment number 4. The 2 watchstanders are in there. They send in the weapons officer. He's the guy that told them to blow down the missile every couple hours with high pressure air. He dies trying to recover or save them. So we're up to 3 casualties now in the first few minutes of the casualty. Toxic gas, fire at sea, seawater's leaking through the tube. It's just a disaster. Part of compartment number 3, which is the back end of the sail, was ruptured and damaged on the inside. So there, you could walk from compartment 3 to compartment 4 without going through a watertight door now inside the submarine. So the captain, surfaces the ship and orders compartment 4 evacuated. You can see a picture of the captain there at the end of this as he's about to be the last person off the submarine there. So the nuclear weapons accident wasn't the only thing that went wrong this time. An unencoded message is sent asking for help, and this will lead to the charges of treason for the captain for sending an unencoded help distress message during this time. But that's sent anyway. Russian rescue tugs SB-406 are dispatched from the Faroe Islands, and the Audiobooks is scrambled from Cuba. They always have these rescue tugs forward deployed to help the submarines out in case something like this happens. Usually it's not as big as this, but if a submarine needs any assistance at all, that is the purpose of these Russian tugboats. They're very large seagoing tugs. Okay, when the damage control parties left the missile compartment, they did not seal it for fire and toxic gas. And so fire and toxic gas began spreading to other compartments, like compartment 5. And of course, compartment 3 is open now due to the explosion of compartment 4. Fire and toxic gas gets into compartment 3. So it's spreading both forward and aft, and it's dividing the crew. For those that are in the bow, they're stuck in the bow compartments. For those in the engine room, they're stuck in the engine room compartments. And there's no way to get from one end of the sub to the other inside the submarine now because there's fire and toxic gas going on. The submarine at this point is on the surface when a reactor scrams itself when loss of power occurs in the engine room due to low grounds on the electrical bus from the flooding, like we had talked about before. You get flooding inside a submarine. One of the next things that's going to happen is you're going to lose electricity. Okay, investigation finds that smoke has spread to compartment 6 now. That's where the diesel generator's at. So whenever you don't have your reactors, you got to start up the diesel generator. Well, you can't do that now. So this casualty is quickly getting out of hand. The reactor control rods that were dropped on the scrammed reactor did not drop properly. The reason why they didn't drop properly is we suspect the heat had changed or bent the springs that spring load the rods in a way that prevented the rod from going down smoothly and was caught basically on the side of the sleeve that allows the control rod to go in and out of the reactor. So it just needs to be mechanically agitated, bumped with a hammer or something to kind of get it to fall the rest of the way. But in order to do that, someone's going to have to go into a reactor compartment with a live reactor that's creating tons of radiation to go and hammer this control rod into place. So they're looking for volunteers. Well, Seaman Preminin makes 3 entries total into the reactor compartment. With his first entry, he had a warrant officer with him, but the warrant officer was exhausted due to heat after just the first entry. But this young sailor, 20-something sailor, Seaman Preminin, made 3 total entries into the reactor compartment to manually lower the rod, saving this reactor that was still critical, that could not be shut down, from becoming more and more hot, becoming more and more critical. It would eventually end in a runaway reaction, which would raise the temperature to the point of melting everything. And then the reactor would fall through the bottom of the submarine, and once it hit seawater, the seawater would try and cool it, generating a lot of steam, essentially causing the reactor vessel to explode. And that would have been a huge nuclear disaster for everybody. Even the Bermudas nearby, it would have affected everything from the east coast of the United States all the way up to Iceland and even into the UK area, because of the Gulf Stream spreading potentially all this contamination throughout the northern Atlantic. This young man here deserves a lot of credit. He essentially sacrificed his own life to keep that from happening. He was fully aware of what he was doing when he was in that. I don't know if he had a moment. He probably didn't have much time to think about the consequences of if he failed, but he definitely did not fail. He succeeded, and sadly he died in reactor compartment 7 when the temperature in the reactor compartment had raised the air pressure to the point to where they couldn't open the door to let him back out again after the 3rd entry, because the pressure difference between compartment 8 and compartment 7. Now, there is a small air pump in the bottom of the reactor compartment that's designed for the situation that they would start up. It's a little vacuum pump, and it basically sucks the air from the compartment 7 into a smaller tank, lowering the pressure in compartment 7 so you can open and close that door. The reason why they put this pump in there from the very beginning of the design was because compartment 7 has one door to get in and out. And if you have any significant pressure difference on either side of that door, there's a good chance it won't open, which is the situation we're in. Well, sure enough, that little pump, because it's getting up to be 140, 150 degrees, it's super hot temperature-wise inside this reactor compartment, that little pump overheats. It begins to smoke and it fails. And it cannot lower the pressure in the reactor compartment. And Seaman Preminin is stuck trying to open this door, growing weaker and weaker by the moment. The crew in compartment 8 is trying to push the door open or pull the door open, and they just can't get it to budge. And it doesn't take long before Preminin just collapses to heat exhaustion and eventually dies of asphyxiation and, of course, radiation, and he just couldn't be helped. But he is a hero of the Soviet Union now. He has been awarded that. His actions are greatly recognized now, even though a lot of this at the time was trying to be, quieted and covered up. Seaman Preminin's actions were selfless, heroic, and saved more than his ship. He saved, the fishing areas of continents. All right, K2-19 nuclear weapons accident. American long-range naval aircraft arrive over top and begin taking a lot of pictures because the Americans just know that there's been a distress signal. We don't know exactly what the hell happened, but whenever the P-3 starts flying overhead, we see this Yankee SSBN with a big hole in it and this brown smoke coming out of it. And the reason why it's brown is because it's very acidic. So it's not only just smoke, it's like eating away at things around it. You don't want to be anywhere near this smoke. All right, it's now the 4th of October. The captain orders the crew to abandon the ship to the rescue vessels that have arrived. The rescue tugs are on site now, and they're going to begin evacuating everybody in small boats. Tow operations begin for the K2-19. They still think that they can save the submarine by simply towing it back to the Soviet Union. On the 5th of October, Russian vessel Krasnogovsky tows K2-19 for 12 hours, towing it back, across the Atlantic towards Mother Russia. It's going to take weeks to get home at this pace, but because there is some flooding occurring somewhere inside the ship sinks lower and lower into the ocean, causing it to become heavier and heavier to tow, and eventually the tow line does break. And they don't have any dewatering ability at this point. The batteries are just about completely gone. And so the ship is clearly just going to eventually sink. There's nothing we can do about it. So there's 5 officers left on board, including the captain. The captain finally gives the order to abandon ship, and everybody gets off. And from the rescue tugs and the tow ship that had arrived, they watched the K2-9 sink at 11:03 a.m.